Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. My beloved brothers and sisters, to our friends, to our viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we are continuing our understanding of the spread of Islam beyond the sands to the west. And that is with a Mecca-centric base of understandings, where we center our minds and our understanding not in Europe, but we center ourselves in Mecca at the place of the final revelation. And from there we saw that Islam spread very early in the Meccan period. This is only 5 years after the beginning of the prophethood that the Muslims went across as refugees into Al-Habasha, into Africa. Muslims were able to establish themselves, and they were given refuge by the great emperor An-Najashi, Ashama An-Najashi. And following the next hijrah, or the next migration to Medina, Islam then established itself in its final form and began to spread to the world. Muslims found themselves under attack by the great nations, the great powers, the Romans and the Persians. And so they responded to the attack. And by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His mercy, they were able to defeat the Romans in the north. This is Byzantine Rome, based in Constantinople. They defeated them. They opened up Syria, Jerusalem, Palestine, all of those areas. And then they began to spread the message across North Africa. And one of the key points is that the spread of Islam was not done through the military itself, but it was with pious people and with education and understanding. The military aspect came about because of the confrontation between the Muslims and the oppressive Byzantines, who were looked upon as a foreign oppressive force throughout North Africa. And so Islam began to spread with Uqba ibn Nafi' rahimahullah, the great Tabi, right across North Africa until they reached the Atlantic. Following this, a great individual, Musa bin Nusayr rahimahullah, was sent by the Umayyad dynasty that was now ruling in Damascus. And he was able to consolidate what Uqba, the initiator, had established. So Uqba moved really fast as an initiator with the ideas full of energy, but the consolidation came about with Musa bin Nusayr rahimahullah. They established the presence of Islam in the western side. So this was the western governorate or imarat for the Khilafah, and so they called it Al-Maghrib. And in Arabic, we know the area as Al-Maghrib up until today, which means the western side. See, that's a Mecca-centric understanding. And so they were able to establish Islam in the countries of Libya, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, right across North Africa, which is a huge piece of territory with an amazing culture. And because of the will of Allah and the wisdom of Musa bin Nusayr, the Amazigh, the indigenous people, started to come into Islam in crowds. And through this, Islam was consolidated. But to the north lay the Iberian Peninsula, which is now known as Spain and Portugal. And there, the Visigoths, who in the name of the Trinitarian Romans had oppressed the people of that area, the Iberian Peninsula, known as Andalusia. They oppressed the people of Andalusia. These were Christians who believed in one God. There were some pagans that were left, and also Jewish people who fled Nebuchadnezzar in 570 BC. And so they were crying out for help. And the cry went to the Emir of North Africa, to Musa. He responded to this through the assistance of his governor, a Christian governor in a place called Ceuta, right on the tip between Morocco and Spain. So through his assistance, his boats, his guidance, the Muslims went across, led by Tariq ibn Ziyad, rahimahullah, the great Amazigh leader. They went across and they confronted King Roderick of the Visigoths. By Allah's mercy, they opened up not only the southern part through a victory over Roderick, complete victory. Roderick had about 100,000, the Muslims had about 17,000. The Muslims were victorious. And then Tariq, an initiator, started to go north. And so he continued to go north as far as he could. Musa joined him. And together, they stayed for 3 years, moving through Al-Andalus, because the name was changed from Vandalusia to Andalusia to Al-Andalus in Arabic. And so for 3 years, they spread Islam. The people opened up their cities. And there was a type of peace and justice established in this land that the people had maybe never known, or that they had not known for centuries. And so the land was settled. It became another part of Islam in the West. So this is now getting far west, and then we're starting to go northwest. And so politics, and this is the struggle that we have to go through, the struggle of a Muslim leadership, started to happen in the Umayyad dynasty. And so with the changing of Khalifa to Khalifa, the leadership was called back to Damascus. So Tariq and Musa went back to Damascus. And the people of Al-Andalus, although they were living in peace and justice, they needed a leader. They needed somebody who could unite their forces, who had that ability to take them forward, initiators, consolidators, and by the mercy of Allah, this came about. Their leadership, or the direction for what would happen in Al-Andalus, came either from Qayrawan, which is Tunisia, as we learned, or Damascus. And now it reached that point where the leader was needed. By the mercy of Allah, an individual comes onto the scene. And this is another name that should be known by all Muslims, not just people from North Africa or the West. But this name should be known by Muslims throughout the Muslim world, because his example is an important example for today. His strategies, his biography is something that all of our children, all of our scholars should study. Abdur Rahman ibn Muawiyah, rahimahullah, and he was one of the Umayyads, and that's not Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, so this is afterwards. Okay, but Muawiyah was a name that the Umayyads used over and over again. And so Abdur Rahman grew up at a time when there were upheaval in the Muslim world. The Umayyads had ruled for a period of time, over 100 years or so they had ruled, and now things started to get corrupted. And a struggle went on, and another dynasty started to come to the fore, and that is the dynasty of Banu Abbas, the Abbasids. And so it is during this time that Abdur Rahman went through a series of changes until he actually got the name Saqa Quraysh, that he was the falcon of Quraysh. And his life, his struggles, his vision set the stage for one of the most important areas of Islamic civilization in our history. And at that time, it was one of the most important places for world civilization. And it should be part of Western history because of the ramifications, because of what happened. But unfortunately, because of Islamophobia, because of wanting to wipe out the traces of Islam, we don't find it in the history books in the way that we should actually find it. And so his life is amazing. He was born in 731 AD in Damascus. And what is interesting is that his father was an Umayyad. They are Arabs from Quraysh. But his mother was Amazigh. She was Berber. And so he had a different kind of lineage, a different kind of background. And this set the stage. This is the will of Allah when this is happening. And so the Abbasid revolution is coming about. And this is now taking the power away from Damascus, which was, overly Arab and Syrian. And now it starts to shift over to the area of Iraq and to Persia. It starts to shift to that area. And unfortunately, and that's one of our pitfalls, the emotions sometimes turn to hatred inside of political struggles. It turned out that the Abbasids started to wipe out every single one of the Umayyads that they could find. And so in 750, this revolution was taking place, and the Umayyad family was massacred. And Abdur Rahman was around 19 years old. He fled Damascus. He was escaping, went over, he was near the Tigris and the Euphrates region, he and his brother. The Abbasids were, following them. And they jumped into the river. The story is an amazing story. They jumped into the river trying to escape. And his brother turned, and the Abbasids, who were flying the black flags of Banu Abbas, they said, "No, come back, it's okay." Abdur Rahman said no. His brother went back, and he was slaughtered as soon as he hit the shore. But Abdur Rahman continued, and he had to go underground. He had to be in disguise. Sometimes they were so close to him that he was put in a disguise as a Muslim woman. They literally put a veil on him, and he had to hide there because they were so insistent upon taking his life. So his travels took him through Palestine, Egypt, and then he reached North Africa. And this was a type of homecoming because the people of North Africa who had lived under the Umayyads, and they respected that family. And now here is one of the children of the leadership, and he's Amazigh too, he's a Berber as well. And so there's a blood relationship. And so they took him in. He went over to Qayrawan. The ulama let him know, you need to go to Al-Andalus because this area has so much potential, but it is in need of a tireless leader. And Abdur Rahman, later known as Abdur Rahman ad-Dakhil, and they called him that. The scholars said, "Awwal man dakhala Cordoba min Bani Quraysh min Bani Umayya hakiman." Awwal man dakhala Cordoba min Bani Umayya hakiman. So he was the first from Bani Umayya to enter into Cordoba, to Cordoba. So dakhala. So they call her Abdur Rahman ad-Dakhil. And he reached into this area. And again, his story is amazing. Like, this is the journey, literally, that he took. And you can see him traveling across North Africa all the way up into this area. And this is without means of communications or travel like today. It's an amazing story. And even today, Muslims, they had wanted to put this into a movie because people love to have movies. And one of the famous Spanish actors, Antonio Banderas, who is known for a number of Hollywood movies, he's actually from Malaga. And he wanted to play Abdur Rahman ad-Dakhil because this is such an important person in European history. So this is not just Islamic history, but this is the history of Spain that should be known by Spanish people. And so Abdur Rahman went north to Cordoba, and he established this key city as his capital. And he began to use his skills and his understanding from having lived in Damascus for so long. And he refurbished the aqueducts. He immediately thought, water. Water is critical. And the Romans had left aqueducts carrying water. And so he refurbished them, he established them, he extended them. And with that water, he was able to bring in life-giving liquids. The water itself is basis of tahara, of purity. And they established gardens, hospitals, public baths. This was something amazing, not known by the Europeans since the fall of the Roman Empire. Following this, Muslims started to gather around him, and some of the local people, because his example was an amazing example. He was a person who led by his own life. He led by example. And so instead of just staying in a distance in a palace, he would walk in the streets amongst the people, disguised as a commoner, to find out what are their problems. He would give the khutbah on Friday in the masjids. He brought scientists, scholars who understood natural life. And so they studied the terrain. What could be needed to upgrade the standard of living in the Iberian Peninsula? It's a very rich climate, but it's in need of products. And this is where North Africa comes in, because North Africa was rich with beautiful products. So it is from North Africa that Abdur Rahman al-Dakhil brought in the olives, they brought in citrus fruits, they brought in different types of grains, and people now seeing this, seeing the industry that's going on, responded. In order to have a base of operations, Abdur Rahman found a huge cathedral. And this Christian house of worship that used to be a pagan Roman temple, Muslims started to pray inside of it. And without taking it necessarily by force, Abdur Rahman paid to the Christians 100,000 dinars. That's a fortune. He paid and he took over the building, and this becomes the great Jamia of Cordoba, the Grand Mosque of Cordoba, and this you see in the picture. This is a present-day picture of what is left of the Grand Mosque of Cordoba, which was the largest house of worship in in Europe. So Abdur Rahman, he was an amazing person. And what was so critical to the leadership at that time is that he was an initiator, tireless, moving around, doing things, new ideas, and he was a consolidator. So you have both an initiator and a consolidator in the same person. And so in terms of administration, he now wanted to consolidate. And so he consolidated the bureaucracy, setting up governors, record-taking, justice was established. He then promoted infrastructure. He built roads, he dealt with irrigation. He built bridges. So you see how civilization is now rising in this area. Of course, he had opposition. And there were remnants, from the Trinitarians. There was also remnants, that actually came from the East. And so, he had opposition, but he created a professional army. So this is another level too. So he literally paid the soldiers, trained people. And his army was made up of the Berber people, Amazigh, of Arabs, and even Slavic people. So there were people from Europe itself who came into his professional army. And with this, he was able to repel the attempts of the Abbasids to defeat him. and internal rivals. Now, it is said that Mansur, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, the leader of the Abbasids, the people said, there's an Umayyad left. So they actually sent assassins to attack Abdur Rahman al-Dakhil. But Abdur Rahman, was a genius. He was cunning. And he caught the assassins. Every plot that the Abbasids did was foiled. The people went back to al-Mansur and said, what should we do? And he said, leave him. Huwa Saqa Quraysh. He is the falcon of Quraysh. So they respected him. They were in awe of him. And so it was a power struggle. This is a weakness of human beings, not sunnah. But in their power, they had respect for him and they left him alone. So what happened is you had the Khilafat continuing there in Iraq and later in Baghdad as the capital. But an Umayyad outpost was still alive in North Africa, and it centered itself in Cordoba, there in Al-Andalus. On the cultural level and architectural level, he supported trade. He was very much into trade, and he was very tolerant. And this is interesting because he fostered education. And so during that time, he said every child, Muslim, Christian, or Jew, was allowed to have a free education. Everybody. And so he fostered education. Now think about the importance of education today and what he was able to do in society. So this society is now rapidly growing. It's an amazing story and something that Muslims need to take example of today instead of thinking that when you consolidate power, it's only military. No. He's dealing with the religion. He's tolerant. He did not force the Christians or Jews to become Muslim. And what comes out of that is the Christians, they started to enter Islam. They entered Islam in large numbers. And this is an interesting point because when we look at the area itself, most people think that the Muslims were Arabs who came into Al-Andalus, or they were Amazigh, they were the Berber people of North Africa, or the African people of West Africa, whether they be from the Senegal or whether they be from the Fula, whichever nation that it was that came in. So they usually, people think that they're people of color who came from Africa. And so the Spanish and the Europeans called them Moors, meaning Moros, which means people of color. This is a mistake because Muslims are not based upon color. The Muslims were all different shades, from whitest of white to the darkest of brown and black. And so when you check the actual census of people, or what could be a census, those historians who actually looked at the population, and it's startling information, and I'll give you sources where you can get this information today, inshallah. Historians and scientists have found out that the majority of the Muslims from this time on living in this area were actually Europeans. So they were people from the Vandals and from the Germanic and from the other Iberian indigenous people who accepted Islam. But when they accepted Islam, to the enemy Christians and Trinitarians, all of you are the same. The same way that they use these terminologies to deal with everybody. Like when the West is fighting Afghanistan, they said Taliban. So anybody who joined the resistance was Taliban. That resistance in Afghanistan was made up of a number of groups, not just the Taliban, but they like to say the other, right? The one faction, and to label you. So Al-Andalus became the most populous, cultured, and industrious nation in all of Europe at the time. Think about this. Jews, Christians living side by side with Muslims, flourishing in the land. And this has been totally wiped out of the history books. And the most ignorant people about Muslims today are the Spanish. Okay, because this was a type of ethnic cleansing genocide that went on in this area. And we know that genocide is not just a physical one, but genocide is also psychological, it is educational. And so when honest historians look back to the year 1000, and this is, when it's established, this is Umayyad dynasty establishing and then growing and then starting to flower. The Cordoba itself had reached the point of having over 200,000 houses, 600 masjids, 900 public baths, 50 hospitals, several huge marketplaces. And these marketplaces are catering for all types of trade, all types of commerce, to the point where they had 15,000 weavers, and the weavers would form unions. So there were literally unions of the weavers that developed at that time. It's an amazing achievement. Water is flowing in the streets. Light, the streets were lit for 10 miles in any direction. Okay, and this is an innovation that took London and Paris literally 700 years to achieve. They were in front of London and Paris. Where do you find that in the history books? It has been totally wiped out with the Eurocentric understanding of the experiences of people. But this is the Mecca-centric understanding. And this is being objective and looking at what happened in the society. And we find, again, the word is being used up until today, convivencia. And convivencia is where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together harmoniously. They lived harmoniously in this area. And it was industrious. People are working, involved in education. Of course, they have their struggles and revolutions, but still the society is growing and flourishing. And it's interesting because at the same time in Palestine, in that area, there were also Christians, there were also Jews and Muslims living side by side. Contrary to the Eurocentric misunderstanding of history, that the Christians were oppressed by the Muslims. No, they were living side by side with the Muslims because we recognize the Christians and the Jews as people of the book. And so this is a present-day picture. When you travel into Spain and Portugal, especially in Spain, because Portugal, fell early. The Muslims lost their land there. We'll be studying somewhat, the history. But in Spain, there is still some. This is a present-day picture of Cordoba. Now, you can see still the Islamic structure that is there. How could this structure still be there? What happened was that later on, after a few hundred years, and we're going to study the rise of Islam, we're looking at it now, and then the fall, and then the rise, and then the fall. Okay, so this is the rise of Islam, but when it starts to fall, and the Trinitarian forces are coming back, and they succeeded in taking over this area, the Christian king wanted to destroy the Jami Mosque. He wanted to destroy it. But the people of Cordoba, Christians, they rose up and they said, leave this building alone. Because you can destroy it in a minute, but it will never be recreated as it is. Leave it. It is a gem. And so literally what they did inside of this structure is that the foundations around the building are the same. You'll see the arches, the famous arches of Cordoba are there. You'll see the place of the domes and still there in this area. And what is interesting, and I recently found in a journey, historical journey, a tour that we took to Spain, and this is the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this picture here I took, this is inside the Cathedral of Cordoba. It's now a cathedral because they put in all the cathedral things and gargoyles and crosses and berries, graves and everything inside the masjid. But, in the corner where the mihrab was of the imam, they left it alone. And literally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used them to take care of this. Because how would we know about what this original masjid looked like? The Christians took it over. And for hundreds of years, we would not have known. And so when you go to the corner, and this is a recent picture, there inside of the masjid, the Jami Masjid in Cordoba, you will see that the writing there is from Surah Al-Hashr. And it's talking about Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illahu, alimul ghaybi wa shahada, Huwa Rahman Rahim, Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illahu, al-Malik al-Quddus, Salam al-Mu'min al-Muhaymin al-Aziz al-Jabbar al-Mutakabbir, Subhanallahi amma yushrikun. So what the verse is saying at the end of Surah Al-Hashr, describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then it says, Subhanallahi amma yushrikun. Glory be to Allah over all of their polytheism. So this verse is screaming out at the masjid itself. And when you stand with your back to this facing into the cathedral, then you will see the statues and the gargoyles and the graves and all the abominations that are inside the cathedral. But the verses of Allah are still there, and they have been taken care of and painted over by the Christians. But they don't know what the Arabic said. And it says, Subhanallahi amma yushrikun. Allah is above them in all of their shirk, in all of what they have tried to do in His name. And so, the Abdur Rahman al-Dakhil, rahimahullah, he ruled for about 33 years and 4 months. Okay, and he embodied the teachings of Islam. He was an initiator. He was a consolidator. This is a picture taken from above to show you what's left still of the structure there in Cordoba. But a weakness started to come in. And that is that he made a mistake that we find in the Umayyad dynasty and the Abbasids, is that his successors were being chosen from his family and not necessarily based upon merit, upon who deserved to be the leader. The original leaders of the Muslim world, the Khulafa Rashidin, you will see that it's a meritocracy. That's how Islamic rule is supposed to be. But they took it from the family, and it becomes like mulk. It becomes a kingdom. Like the Umayyads were a kingdom, the Abbasids were a kingdom. And this is a mistake that was made at that time. So I want to open up the floor for any questions that anybody may have concerning this important period. I've abbreviated it, but it is such an important period. The example of Abdur Rahman al-Dakhil, and at the foundation that he set for the 800 years that Muslims were living in this area. So the floor is open for any general questions that anybody may have. Yes, so the question is, how do we bring back this golden age that happened at that point in time? This will be our study, inshallah, that we will see that the history of Islam in the West, and especially this part of the West, it is one of the clearest forms of the rise and the fall and the rise of Islam and Muslims. And so in the next few periods, inshallah, we will be studying Islam in the West, its rise, its fall, then its rise again, and then its fall. So and this will show us in a living way how we can reestablish ourselves. And that is based upon the Sunnah, that is based upon the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the justice, the qualities, the giving of zakat, the equity amongst the people, calling to the good and forbidding evil. And we will see how this was done. It is still possible for us to do this, as we will see what happened in this time. So the floor is open again for any general questions that anybody may have. Floor is open.
Question, so can we say that a lot of the traditions of the Orthodox Christians in Spain and Europe come from Islam?
So can we say that many of the traditions of the Orthodox Christians in Spain and Europe come from Islam? No. The basis of the Catholics, the Orthodox, you have to go back to the Council of Nicaea. And then you will see the division that happened in Christianity between their understanding of, the cross, the Trinity, but some still believed in one God. So this is what was established amongst the Christians there, and this is what the Muslims found there. What Muslims did is that they brought in Islamic culture. So they reinforced the believers in one God. So all the people, the indigenous people who had believed in one God who were there, and they were being oppressed by the Visigoths, Trinitarians, they started to enter into Islam in crowds. They became the majority of Spanish Muslims. Okay, so it was a natural thing for them to go back to the belief in one God. And you'll find this in many parts of Europe. They say that the Bosnian people, this is now going, east into Bosnia, the Slavic area, they were originally believers in one God. They did not accept the Council of Nicaea. But they found themselves, and this is later on, in between the Crusaders and the Ottoman Turks. So they found themselves, in between them. And they accepted Islam because that was closest to their belief. And Bosnians become very important Muslims up until today. And so the traditions of Christianity are based upon their own understanding. But what Islam does, it brings the living culture of Tawheed, of unity. And that is the unity of the oneness of Allah, the unity of human beings, and the unity of knowledge. That is, that secular knowledge and sacred knowledge is from the same source. So you can live as a God-fearing person, and you can be involved in science, you can be involved in agriculture, you can be involved in warfare, whatever it is, whatever aspect of life, and still believe in one God and still follow the ways of the Creator. Okay, so the floor is open for any other general questions anybody has. Now, I want to give you some sources, because naturally the question comes, where are we going to find this information? And I've put it together and summarized it, from many years of traveling, but I want to give you a few sources in English, because, there's not that many in English. There's some in Arabic and other sources. But number one, you need to read the writings of Ahmed Thompson. So Ahmed Thompson is a British Muslim lawyer, and Abdur Rahman, Muhammad Abdur Rahman, and there's a book called For Christ's Sake, right? It was put out by Taha Publishers in 1989. Also, Ahmed Thompson has a book called Islam in Andalus, okay, and Taha Publishers. So you can get these online. And so this will give you now a good base in English with sources. Another very good work, one of the best I've found, by a European writer, Michael Barry. It's called Homage to Al-Andalus, The Rise and Fall of Islamic Spain. So this is an excellent work, which goes into a lot of details as well. Now, another great Islamic writer, S.E. al-Jazairi, he's an Algerian writer, and he wrote The Golden Age and Decline of Islamic Civilization. So his publishing house, Beit al-Hikmah, he's got a number of works. I believe you can get this online as well. These are really excellent books. And then Firas al-Khatib and lost Islamic history. Okay, so these are some of the sources where you can get the Islamic history to give you a more Mecca-centric understanding. Now, tonight, you can go online. It's interesting because somebody would say, well, this is Abdullah Hakim and you Muslims are always saying things. This is a European journalist, Bethany Hughes, and she did a documentary called When the Moors Ruled in Europe. So you can go online right now and you can watch this amazing documentary. She's not a Muslim, but she objectively looked at what happened in this part of the world. And it's startling information she's bringing out. And she's not just talking from the top of her head, she's interviewing Spanish people. She's bringing you scientific facts and information about what happened in this area at that time. And you can go online tonight and actually see what happened. Now, the weakness that happened with the Umayyad rule, it continued there. And these are basic amirs. These are some of the amirs before we get to the major amir of the Umayyads. The second one is Hisham, the first. And he ruled from 788 to 796. So he's the son of Abdur Rahman al-Dakhil. And he was trying his best. He promoted Islamic Sharia. And he sent military campaigns into the Christian areas. Remember, far in the north, Lyon. And then the borders of Pyrenees Mountains in France. So he continued to call to the good and forbid evil. And so he ruled for a period of time. He was a good leader. It was then taken over by Al-Hakam the first from 796 to 822. Now, there were some internal revolts that were happening now. And within their history, they have the Day of the Trench, and there was an uprising in Cordoba. Again, things are getting a little bit weaker because it's not a meritocracy. But he strengthened the army, and he centralized a lot of the power. And he was, a fairly good leader. He was keeping the banner of Islam going. The next of these leaders is Abdur Rahman II. Okay, Abdur Rahman Dakhil is the first. Now Abdur Rahman II. And he was a patron of the arts and sciences. Okay, so he put a lot into scientific study and the different arts and, writings. And he did amazing educational work. And he strengthened their foreign relations. So people were coming in, even from the Byzantine Empire. They were recognizing this emirate there in Al-Andalus. And he was known for public works. So he expanded the masjid in Cordoba, in Cordoba, and some amazing work. Now, if you see on the side here, these are the columns. So these are the famous columns of the Jamia, Masjid of Cordoba. And because of the protest of the people, the Christian king at the time did not destroy the shell of the Islamic building. So you can go there today to Cordoba and you can still see this. I took this picture here in the masjid, and you'll see this is being used by people in different parts of the world. It's an inspiration to Muslims. And recently, alhamdulillah, a standing miracle came about. And this is in Houston, Texas. So that might sound surprising to you. But by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after centuries, Hispanic people who related to Spain, but from mainly the indigenous people, Latino people, are coming into Islam in crowds in America, in Central America, in South America. So you look at Colombia, you go down to Chile, you go to many parts of this area, you'll see, hundreds of Muslim people, indigenous people coming into Islam. And the community there in Houston, Texas, Islam in Spanish. And for those of you who are Spanish speaking, you can go online to islaminspanish.com, I believe. It's put in Islam in Spanish, and you'll be able to get translation of the Quran in Spanish. You'll be able to get education. You'll be online. And their inspiration was the masjid in Cordoba. So they rebuilt this in a usable masjid form there in Houston. They used the same arches from the masjid in Cordoba. And I witnessed this, alhamdulillah, last year, the opening of this center. It was a miracle, a standing miracle, that these columns, this spirit, which began with Abdur Rahman al-Dakhil. He's such an important person. And the people are so important, the achievements, that it has come back to life. In America, of all places, in the belly of the beast, it has come about in these times, and it is still spreading, alhamdulillah. So this was a great achievement of the people at the time, and this was the beginning of Banu Umayyah and the great civilization of Al-Andalus, known as Andalusia, and this is one of the most important places in the West for the presence of Muslims. So I want to open up the floor again for any questions that anybody may have concerning this very important time within our history dealing with Islam in the West. Okay, so we've gone across North Africa, we've gone up into Spain, and now you can say the West, because many people who say the West today, they mean like Europe and the Americas. Okay, so this now is Europe. This is Islam in Europe. This is European history. Any questions online? Question.
Islam in Spanish?
Yes, so the Islam in Spanish is a group in Houston, Texas, and these are people, Latino people, who are embracing Islam, and they are finding, with the presence of Muslims in the area, that the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they were able to come together and develop a community there in Houston, Texas, a beautiful masjid that is there. The imam, a great brother, Brother Isa Perez, he's from El Salvador. Okay, he's a graduate of Medina University. He's the imam. One of their major teachers is an Afro-Panamanian from Panama. The leader of the group, Mujahid Fletcher, and his wife, they are from Colombia. Okay, so you have, and then many active Muslims from Mexico. Okay, so it's like a pan-Latino community. And of course, there are indigenous people as well, indigenous other Americans, Europeans, Afro-Americans, who are also part of the community. And it is part of the greater community there in Houston itself. And if you go online to islaminspanish.com or .org, and .org? Yeah, so islaminspanish.org. So if you go there, and if you're a Spanish-speaking person, you can get, the Quran in Spanish. You can get regular lessons being taught right now. You can get Friday sermons. You connect with Spanish-speaking Muslims. This is the largest Spanish-speaking website, I believe, in the world. And fast-growing community. And we are connecting it now. This is Islam in the West, right? So we already jumped across the ocean. Okay, so this is Islam in the West. And it's growing still. But we need to see the stages in this. So we're moving slowly in the stages historically to give you some background, to understand the rise and the fall of the Muslims in this area. And in our next class, inshallah, we're going to look at the heights of this. We're going to look at the heights of the Muslims who lived in this area, the Umayyad dynasty or Imarat, and when it turns into the highest part with Abdur Rahman and Nasir al-Din-illah. Next class, inshallah, we will look at this. It's another amazing part of Islam in the West. And this should be European history. This should be studied by the European Union. How many people in the European Union understand this? That Islam is not a foreign thing. They're trying to kick Muslims out of France, to kick Muslims out of Holland, saying that you people are foreigners. They're not foreigners. They have been living for hundreds of years. As a matter of fact, in Spain itself, you could say that maybe 50 to 60% of Spanish culture up until now came from the Muslims. And you will see this in their houses. You will see this in their food. You will see this in the words that they are using. Don Quixote in their literature was actually a Muslim story. Their paella, which is the national dish in Spain, where you sort of take your leftovers and mix them up, especially with shrimp and with spice and rice, and you make. So it's al-baqiyya. So baqiyya means baqi, that which is leftover. It's your leftovers. So the Muslim took the leftovers and spiced it up and put some rice in it and put some shrimp and other things, and now it's the national dish. How many people know that this is from the Muslims? You see? The Alhambra, which we'll study inshallah, the Alhambra Palace in Granada. It is the most visited place in Spain and maybe the second most visited place in all of Europe now, and is built by the Muslims. So this is a critical part of European history, and it's a critical part of Islamic history, but it is not so well known by the Muslims. So with this, if there are no more questions online, next week, inshallah, we will continue on for the conclusion of the Umayyad dynasty in this area and the heights that they reach, and then to start to show how it falls and then how it rises. Again, I leave you in peace. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.